This is about humans dreaming together.
About humans supporting each other on our journeys.
It's about the science and the art behind making our dream lives a reality.
To the students of life,
the young and the curious,
the dreamers and the doers,
to those who crave to be a strong individual
and want to be part of something bigger than themselves. Welcome.
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 Welcome to the Dreamology podcast. Welcome to the Dreamology podcast, everyone. Dreamology is the study of the art and the science behind making our dream lives a reality. And on this show, we are focused on giving you the mindset, tools, and strategies for making daily progress towards your dreams, no matter where you are in your journey. My name is Tim Bishop. I am the co-founder of the Dreamers Initiative, a student of life, and a life conversation junkie who is on a mission to identify how to truly live the dream life and help you do the same. The guests on this show include best-selling authors, neuroscientists, entrepreneurs, and just dream chasers out in the world who share their knowledge, greatest stories, and life lessons with us. And before we dig in, I want to mention this podcast is brought to us by the Dreamers Initiative, a personal development community for helping Gen Z and millennials awaken their dream life and make them a reality. We believe humans are stronger together and that together we can accomplish anything. Let's get started on today's episode. Today's guest is two-time cancer survivor, musician, coach, husband, and father, Andy Nelson. And Andy inspired me from the moment that I met him, because when he talks about his experiences with cancer, he talks about all of what he calls the gifts of cancer, the things that cancer showed him that he did not know before he had cancer, how cancer showed him that life is short and that we need to do our most important work now, and that there's really no need to wait, and that we shouldn't let the pressures of the outside world or others' expectations or our own old views or parents' expectations get in the way of the things that we are really supposed to do with our lives. And so before this interview, I asked Andy, I said, Andy, what I really want out of this conversation is to figure out, how does someone get injected with that feeling of understanding that life really is short without having to have cancer? And so that's a big theme for the conversation here today. And so I'm excited to share with you all the amazing things that we talked about and the lessons that Andy has to share with us. So let's dig in. Andy, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. Thanks, Tim. I am super excited to be here, honestly. One of the things I've realized lately, especially, is I want to share my story and ask good questions, whether or not I have the answers or not. And so I'm just excited to be here and talk with you today, Tim.
That's amazing. Well, why don't we dive right in, because I know we got a lot of good things to talk about.
Cool. Let's do it.
This is obviously the big topic of your story here. But you talk a lot about the gifts of cancer, and I want to just dive into that and you can give a little bit of a backstory. I can ask some questions later on the process and the journey of your experience with cancer. But I just right off the bat, when you talk about your gifts of cancer, I want you to talk about what you mean by that and what gifts you kind of have value from the experience of what you've been through.
Yeah, the gifts of cancer. It does. I mean, it's an odd phrase just to begin with.
It is.
Right? Let's just go there. It is odd. What I mean by that is, no matter what happens to us, there's always something good to be found. And part of life, I think, at least for me, has been, how can I uncover what the gift is there? What is next? And no matter how bad things are, what can I do now? What can I do now? So it's really a lot about that question.
Interesting. Yeah. Because, the thing that I take right away too is, and I know we've talked about this before, is the idea that, everyone has, I guess, and again, this is not to demean what you went through, but, their own cancer, like their own thing they're going through, their own struggle. And again, this is a question that you might have thought about a lot, but do you think about like why you're able to see the gifts in these kind of things, while for others it's really challenging to see the gifts and the struggle that we've been through? Like, is there a
Mm,
certain way that you go about viewing it that others could also? Because everyone goes through struggles, right? And some seem to have this innate ability to see the positive and the gifts, and some don't. So, how do you?
yeah.
Why do you think there's that difference there?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, the first way I would answer that is, I some people tend to be more have a more of a positive outlook, and other people tend to have more of a negative outlook, you could say, or just able to find the problems more easily and pinpoint those. There's no right or wrong there, is the first
Hmm.
thing that I'd say. And part of my journey these days, honestly, is appreciating the folks more who can, stick with the negative and focus on that, because even though that's not the cloth from which I'm cut, um, there are gifts in that too. Help us
Mm.
see what's really going on, and get as much data as possible about the challenge. So I want to be really thoughtful right at the front about not making people wrong who don't have a positive attitude, right?
Right.
um, and honestly, now that I say I've been upgraded to a 2-time cancer survivor just in the
Hey.
last couple of months. So celebrate celebrating that, again, as odd as that sounds. But one of the things that's coming with me this time around is that, um, really to be with the negativity, at least for a moment or two,
Mm.
before I jump on to saying, "Oh, this is, now this is so great. Hey, now I'm upgraded to the 2-time cancer survivor." And I know that some people are listening to this are saying, "Wow, what a great positive attitude." And other people are saying, "Oh, what a pain in the neck, unbearably positive guy that Andy Nelson is. Like, shut up, would you? I've had cancer and it's terrible. The chemo it sucked. It I put neuropathy in my fingers and in my feet, so I can't even feel when I'm trying to run. It makes me, gives me sick to my stomach all the time. I can't stand this cancer. And by the way, I'm worried how long I'm actually going to live. I don't deserve this. This sucks. And you know what? All that stuff I just said is absolutely true of me as well. And I feel
Mm.
that, and I feel that deeply. And you know what? This is the lot that I've been cast. This is, you already know, Tim, that I'm a man of faith, and this is a cross that apparently I am bearing, and that I'm meant to bear. And if it's for God's greater glory, then bring it on. Like I'm
Mm.
here to share my story and see what I can do next.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up a point that I was already thinking about before our conversation, which was, you know, there must be moments of low, moments of, hardship that you went
Yeah,
through.
for
And,
sure.
actually I had a conversation with someone the other day about something you just said, which is just allowing yourself to feel those emotions, instead of
Mm,
pushing them aside and burying them. But my follow-up question to that would be, when do you know it's time to, like, when do you know that feeling the emotion is no longer serving you? You
mm,
sit in it and you acknowledge, like, this sucked, like this was not an enjoyable experience to go through all of this. But when do you make the switch, or are they both always there? Can you just talk about the dynamic of, because I think it's okay to say, wow, I had a bad day or a bad month or a bad year. I went through all this stuff, but what's the, because you found your gifts, like what is the balance between feeling the negative emotion and striving to view the gifts, or just moving forward with life, I
mm.
guess.
What's the balance of it? Yeah,
And
boy,
balance might not be the
balance.
right word. I don't know what the
Yeah.
right word is
No,
there.
I think it's a beautiful word, actually. I think it's a good one to consider, um, because you're right. Um, there are times where it's great to focus, a season and a time for everything, right? And there's a time to focus on that, as the counselor I'm seeing now, who is an awesome counselor, as she has pointed out. Um, Sometimes you got to taste the lemons before you start making lemonade,
Hmm.
and I love that because I your listeners already can tell, right, that I tend to more of the positive side of being able to find the meaning and finding, oh, this is a gift. And thank God for that. I'm so thankful for that gift. I honestly believe it's part of why I'm still alive, that I'm able to do that.
Mm.
And um, sometimes I need to pause before I start making lemonade to say, this sucks. Like, this is not, let me just be clear, right? And even in my prayer life, to be, Martin Luther said the first rule of prayer, I think, is don't lie to God. Like
Hmm.
it, like fake it till you make it has its value, absolutely. Or as I like to say, fake it till you become it, I think is even more helpful. But in your prayer life, sometimes we tend to be so like, oh, thank you, God, for everything. It's just a wonderful life, and just appreciate all your blessings. Amen. Thanks for the food. Amen. And it's like, wait a minute, this day just sucks. This really freaking sucks. And by the way, I'm not happy at all that my cancer came back a second time. This is pissing me off. And to be able to be honest about that, taste those lemons, honestly, at least that's part of what I'm still discovering for myself. Just being honest, be truthful, be direct about that. And then when you feel like you got it out of your system to finally answer your question a little bit, Tim, like, okay, whew, that feels better. I was honest. And now, okay, what can I do next? What can I
Yeah.
do about this? Or even maybe like the question, as part of my history is, and currently I'm an executive coach and career coach. And I'm like, how long do I want to stay there? Just asking yourself that question. It's kind of self-coaching, right? But
Huh.
how long do you want to complain about this, Andy? Do you want to take an hour? You want to take a day, take a week? Like, I'm a choice. And
Hmm.
be able to answer that question honestly, give yourself that time, and then move on.
Hmm. Yeah, I like I like that self-coaching self-coaching there.
Yeah, right.
That's
What's you're thinking about that a little bit. What's coming up for you, Tim? I'm curious.
yeah, well, I'm thinking about it. I mean, my thought based off what you said is almost like it takes time to kind of build some awareness around how you're feeling and what you're feeling, and you're still maybe even going through that process right now.
Totally.
But once
Yeah.
you learn to kind of sit with it and understand, okay, here's honestly what's going on, here's how I feel, that's almost like the moment you can go, okay. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like these two things came together, how you're viewing it, what's actually happening, and then you go, and then once you have that understanding, then you kind of said, all right, now I can make the choice as to how I want to proceed. So that was a great answer to a very difficult question.
Thank you. Glad I'm on the scoreboard. That's good.
Yeah, we'll do
The,
we'll do
the
some
awareness.
tally marks.
Yeah. Please keep track. Yeah. I got to tell you that word that you just used is one of my favorite words, awareness.
Hmm.
There's so much to that, Tim. And whether you're coaching someone or yes, trying to coach myself, I think there can be so much goodness there in just pausing to be aware.
Hmm.
Um, and people might say, well, that's kind of dumb. Like what? Like there's a chair? Like what's the awareness that's important here? But no, I mean about the most important stuff in our life. And I mean because
Hmm.
we're so hectic. Man, life's moving so fast. We've got all this information around us, asking for our attention. And you know what? I've got the Apple Watch now, and it tells me to pause when it can tell my heart rate's going up and take a breath. Like a minute of deep breathing. And once you
That's
know, like
cool.
it's super cool. And once you know it's right, I can tell because all the time when it's telling me that, I'm like, I can't stop now. I got to get to a meeting. You can't tell me to take a minute and stop, take a breath. I was like, oh, you're actually right. Now's the perfect time for me to take 1 minute of deep breathing and just take a chill pill.
Yeah.
Just take a pause, be aware
Hmm.
of the fact that I am like crazy busy and there's lots of stuff going on. And yes, I just had chemotherapy last week, which is true. And yes, I'm going back to the Mayo Clinic next week for scans to see where the cancer has gone. Has it increased? Has it decreased? Has it stayed the same? Yeah, I got stressed, man. Absolutely. And you
Yeah.
know what? Today, I can still take a time to pray. I can take time to pause and to be aware, to use your word, of what's around me, both the good and the bad, and then move on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great word. I mean, I feel like every, self-help or motivation book or anything that I've read, that's kind of where everyone starts. And it's something that it doesn't feel innate. Like it doesn't, like, from the beginning of time, you're not just kind of like, oh, I'm going to be aware about everything. But the more you dive into it, it seems like it's the foundation for a lot of things, like just
Yeah.
self-awareness,
Right.
awareness of mindfulness, whatever, just having that, like, knowledge of okay, this is what's actually going on in my life, instead of just being pulled by, external and everything else that's going on. And
Oh, totally true. Not being pulled by the external. And we're always at choice, right? We get to choose what we're going to focus on and what we're going to be aware of.
mm,
So, sometimes I think we can get so wrapped around the axle, we're like, oh, I got to be more aware, now suddenly I'm not aware because I'm getting so wrapped around the axle trying to be aware. Um, but we're at choice of what to be aware of, right? And so I think that might actually be a little extended answer to one of your earlier questions for me, which I really enjoyed, which was, you know, um, well, one of the phrases that I appreciate, I can't remember who came up with this first here. Dr. Wayne Dyer mentioned it at one point, but what you focus on expands. And so
mm,
what do you want to focus on? And yes, when things are crappy, um, it's good to acknowledge the truth. Like, don't bury the truth. Absolutely. And then at a certain time, just know that if you continue to focus on that and that awareness of how crappy it is that I have cancer again, I didn't see this coming, didn't want that. If I keep focusing on that, that might take me to a place where I don't want to go. And at least that's
yeah,
true for me. And so
yeah.
I can decide instead to say, wow, I'm looking out my basement window right now and I see this cardinal in the trees, and it's
mm,
in the middle of this cold Minnesota winter. That is just such a beautiful sight. That's what I'm going to focus on right now.
yeah. There has been some beautiful winter days here. Like, I don't love winter, but I'm also doing, like, my best to go outside and be like, wow, the snow in the
Oh,
trees does look good today.
same here, man. It is definitely not my favorite season, but yet, yeah, like
Yeah.
you got it going on too, don't you? You've got the positive attitude. You can redirect yourself. So I
Yeah,
like
I
it.
mean,
Yeah. Tell me how you do it.
yeah, well, I mean, because I'm relating this, obviously, I always just hear this and then self-reflect on what's going on in my life. But I mean, that's
Yeah.
been for sure the experience for me. Like, I think this was Barbara Fredrickson. I don't know if you know who that is. She's a
Yeah.
psychologist at UNC, but she had kind of said something along the lines of, when you commit to making a positive choice for yourself, and I believe she was talking about, like, meditation and, like, mindfulness,
Hmm.
and she was saying, you know what, I can't really tell if it's mindfulness as a whole that is what's causing people all these benefits, but it's like making the choice to commit to something like that kind of leads to a compounding evolution of positive behaviors in your life. And I've started to notice that for sure, as, like, I committed to one simple thing, which was kind of like, or hard thing, but it was one commitment, which was, let's just figure out what your ideal life is in the terms of the
Mm.
podcast. Like, what is an extraordinary life?
Yeah.
And let's just commit to that, and then let's go from there. And as I've started to build now, it's been about a year or so since I've committed to that. Um, Over the course of time, you just become more and more and more and more and more mindful as you dig through all the crap, and and a couple
Yeah.
months you're like, that sucks, I hated that, but all right, now let's go here and now let's figure this out. And so for me, it's been just like a compounding effect to the point where now I love the challenge of a new challenge. I love the idea of trying,
Mm.
oh, here's this new, like, plant-based diet that people are trying. Like, what could I learn about food? Or here's this new meditation technique. What could I learn about this? Or here's this person who's been through this. And I've just grown kind of obsessed with that process. And I think through that, I've been able to, because I've felt some lows, I know, like, if we're going to use our aware term, I feel like I'm more aware
Mm.
when they're coming. And then I step back and say, okay, something's not right. And I try to step back and figure out what it is, and, like, tweak it if possible, and
Mhm.
then move forward. So just when I see those things coming, trying to see them and then figure it out, like what's a fun, creative way I could tackle this problem. And actually, a great example is I won't ramble for too much longer, but a great example
No, I'm very curious.
is what I'm doing right now. So I just started this week. Actually, it's February. This interview won't be released till later on. So for listeners, this was recorded in February. But
Mhm.
um, I noticed that, being an entrepreneur and having my days kind of up to my control, that I was kind of extending days, and I was realizing that maybe that wasn't serving me. Like maybe the quantity of hours was there was I was losing a little bit of quality potentially by just kind
Mm.
of viewing my day as okay, it's an open book. Like I can work from 8 to 2 and then take go work out and do this, and then I can work from 6 to 11 p.m. if I want. Like, and in
I love
January,
that you noticed that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, in January, I was like, I'm gonna just work my butt off, and I did it, and I got far, and I enjoyed it. But towards the end of the month, I was like, okay, this isn't a sustainable approach. So what can we fix? Like, I'm starting to feel a little bit like uneasy, and I was like,
Mhm.
well, let's see what the opposite looks like. So now I'm like, all right, in February, I'm gonna wake up at 5 a.m. every day. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to meditate, journal, and I'm going to read a book for 15 minutes. And that's how I'm going to start my day. And then I'm going to
Wow.
try to, so all
Impressive.
the good stuff is going to be right at the beginning. And then after that, I'm going to just heads down and I'm going to work. And then when like 5 o'clock hits, 6 o'clock, assuming there's nothing that's like pressing due the next day, like my day's done. So now I'm like, let's experiment with like the complete opposite. Let's try something
Yeah. Yeah.
totally different than what I was doing, just to see if it serves me. It's not like I'm committing to this for life, but maybe I learn a few amazing things about this. And I already am learning that I love moving in the morning. Moving my body
Oh,
in the
isn't
morning
that cool? And
just
like a day
wakes me
begun
up.
well
Yeah.
is half won, you
Yeah.
know? Like,
So
so cool. I love your noticing about that and appreciating the challenge. And now you've got a couple experiments in process, or maybe one, completed at least in the month of January. The second one, like, okay. And now you've got some new things that you can notice and be aware of.
yeah.
I love that you mentioned that, Tim, and I'd love to hear more about your story with that too. I'm going to chime in with one additional thing because so true story, after you and I agreed on a date just about a few days ago that we were going to do this interview, this conversation, I woke up in the middle of the night right after that, like 1 a.m, and I just had thoughts going through my head. And so I had to write down, like, there were these, like, boy, I don't know, what do I even want to say, or what do I possibly have to share that might be useful? And so I wrote down like three things, actually, three concepts. And one of them is continuous learning
Hmm.
that has just kept me going for all these years, including through cancer, well before it, and after it. God willing, we'll get through this latest little batch, and I'll be cancer free again. But you just mentioned that for yourself. What a beautiful example of continuous learning. Literally 2 months in a row. Oh, tried this. Here's what I noticed with that. Trying this. Here's what I'm noticing. That,
Hmm.
man, that's like continuous learning in a nutshell.
Sweet. Well, if you
Yeah.
don't mind sharing, what are the other two bullet points while
Oh
we're
yeah.
while
I've,
we're
I've,
bringing it up? Let's
I'm
I mean
giving you
let's
the teaser, right?
yeah, let's dive
Yeah.
in. Let's go all
Gotta
the way.
gotta dive into those. Yeah. Yeah. Continuous learning is one of them. And the other one is, honestly, they ended up all beginning with C for some crazy reason. The second one is control. And
Mm.
I just want to let us sit with that word for a second, because it conjures up, typically for people, a variety of feelings and thoughts about it. Right. And so what I mean with control, just really briefly, and we can dive deeper if you'd like to, is it's a two-sided coin. It's control, like, what can I control? And what should I control, frankly? I know should is another very charged word, so I don't use that lightly. But especially thinking about, you've got me thinking about my younger years, up until this point too. And man, when I was younger, I thought I could control everything. I really did. And even though intellectually I understood that wasn't possible, and being a man of faith, I realized God's really in charge. But still pretty much, well, I'm pretty smart. I got this figured out. I kind of know what to do. And you see things like, the previous generations who are, having life-threatening illnesses, for example, and you're like, oh, haven't you read the latest research? Like, all you have to do is like stop eating so many bacon cheeseburgers and donuts, for crying out loud, and you'll be fine, you know? And then, like, little did I know, in my 40s still, I would get life-threatening stage 4 cancer, right? As much as I tried to control it, I could not control that. I thought I had it figured out, got myself in shape, was definitely never been a big, donut and bacon cheeseburger guy, except maybe in my late teens or early 20s. But I just love, as a former leader of mine once said, like, let's admire the problem just for a minute. Let's admire the question that how much can we control? How much can't we control? And how do we find that balance? So control is a big theme for me. And I'll just do a little sneak preview on the third one here is connectedness. And I intentionally am using that word and not connections, because I think connections, especially, when you're thinking about being younger in your careers, for example, sometimes connections like, oh, I get it. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Like, I just need to make a lot of connections, need to be powerful people, and they're going to get me that next job. Well, maybe not. Connectedness, in my way of thinking and feeling, is much deeper, actually. It's about, in the grand scheme of things, acknowledging that we're connected, like, to other people in the world in ways that we don't even fully understand. And I believe the sooner we realize that and really absorb it and are aware of it, using that word again, that's goodness there, like connectedness. And we can be very deliberate about that. We can, see somebody who's also going through a procedure at Mayo Clinic, and even if we don't have a chance to have a conversation with them, just say a quiet prayer for them, like whatever, or open it up to the whole room, everybody who's waiting to get a scan, like I'm going to be next Wednesday. Like, God, please help the person who is suffering the most in this room right now. That's a way of me practicing connectedness, and I haven't said any words out loud. And then another way of connectedness I'll mention is friendship, and this is something that my amazing wife, and I really want to mention her and how grateful I am for her getting me through cancer. She's just the ultimate caregiver, and thank God she and I decided to get married almost 24 years ago, because it's such a it's such a wonderful marriage, and I've learned so much from her. Something that she has commented about me is that, you're pretty good with your relationships with your guy friends. And I thought, am I? I'm wondering, and to the extent that I am, I think it's because I'm intentional about it. I think it's because if I've got somebody that I really connect with, that who's a good friend, it doesn't matter if I'm going to move cross country. I'm going to find a way to stay in touch with that person, which I literally did. It's a great friend of mine, Mac Cherry. That's his real name, not a stage name, but he is a musician. And he and I worked together in bands years and years ago. And then when I was getting ready, we moved to Austin, Texas for 5 years. Loved living in that town. And I remember being extremely intentional. And I said out loud to him, I said, I will not let this friendship falter. We are going to stay connected. And that comes from a place, I just felt it in my bones. Like, this is too good of a man. I look up to him. He's about 10 years older than I am. Such a man of faith, so strong with his family and his marriage, and a great musician I love playing music with. I'm like, okay, that's a good bingo. Like, we're not going to lose track of this friendship. I refuse to let it falter. And we haven't. And to this day, we stay connected. So connectedness and being really deliberate about that, that's the third thing that came to my mind at 1 a.m. So now you heard it.
You were dreaming about it. Those subconscious thoughts were cooking in there.
That's it. It must have been. Something was cooking. Absolutely.
I love that word. I think I first heard that word from the Dalai Lama, actually, who talked about
really?
interdependence or something along that nature of just
yes.
the idea of this like false illusion that like independence exists when like we rely on literally everything for our existence. Like,
Oh, so true.
other people
Interdependence.
make our
Yes.
food, and the animals do this, and the earth does this, and you do this, and I think it's beautiful when you start to see, you know, the inner workings of all of it, and you can start to
Yeah.
get that picture a
Yeah.
bit.
Oh, amen to that. I love that you know the Dalai Lama's work. There's a book that he came out with just a couple of years ago, I think, with
Oh,
somebody else.
it's the
Do you
Book of
remember?
Joy. Yeah, it's
That's
like
what
my
it is,
second
man.
favorite book of all time.
Oh, yes. Okay.
That book
Brothers in
is,
arms on that.
I've actually
Yes.
released an episode about it. I've read it, and I talked about it for
Seriously?
like 40 minutes because I'm like, this is well, it's funny because that's my second favorite book ever. My favorite book ever is The Alchemist, which
Yeah.
listeners here probably know because I've talked about it.
Love that as well.
But they
Also
talk
one of my favorite books.
it talks about, like, the language of the universe, and how like everything's connected, and how the wind and the earth and the soul, and how like everything is here, and so yeah, I think that connectedness is such a powerful
Wow.
way to put that together. So that's super cool that your brain told you that while you were mid REM cycle.
Right? Absolutely. That's when it happened. I'm just appreciating how cool it is that you love The Alchemist and the Book of Joy. Man,
Oh,
you
great
are
books.
so awake for a young man here, Tim. It's so cool, such an honor, and so cool to be on your podcast. Two of my favorite books as well, honestly. The Alchemist I read probably close to when it first came out, several years ago, and really was inspirational to me, just thinking about, what is the universe?
Yeah.
What is the Andy universe that I am, mythically somehow controlling? It's back to that control word a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like we may be controlling things we don't even realize. So why not put out the good stuff,
Yeah.
so we can control some of that. And then the Book of Joy, literally, I was reading that when I was in the chemotherapy chair for the first time when I first had stage 4 cancer. So it has a special place in my heart.
Wow. That must have helped a lot.
It did. It did.
Words of wisdom. Well, we've been talking about great things, but let's talk about that story a bit, because I'm
Mhm.
curious, the pre-cancer Andy as
Mhm.
opposed to the post-cancer Andy. Like,
Yeah.
what was life like a couple of years before you found out you had stage 4 cancer?
Hmm. Yeah. A couple of years before, I will go there. I'm feeling that I want to answer it starting with this, which is, um, I really can't emphasize enough the value of, as a then 24-year-old, going on my first silent retreat. This is at a place here in Minnesota called DeMontreville. And I mention this because as a 24-year-old, I think that was my age at the time, it was just such a breath of fresh air. And out of all the, Raina Maria Rilke calls it the unanswered questions in my heart, out of
Hmm.
all the things I was struggling with at the time and felt were like, oh, this is life changing. I must, solve this problem. Um, I go back and look at my notes from that retreat. I'm like, oh, yeah, that turned out to not be a thing at all. Or mostly it's gratitude, thankfulness just for putting that seed of experiencing a silent retreat, which I know some people are still like, what the heck is a silent retreat? That sounds kind of goofy. Yes, it is a little bit kind of monk light, but I've had huge profits from it, over spiritual profit, I might add, from it over the years. So I mentioned that, Tim, because having that experience and of going on retreats, um, really grounded me in the sense that I'm finding, I know we're going a lot in the spiritual direction today, but that's where I'm feeling called today, is it just helped me realize that no matter what else is going on, I do know that God loves me, um, and that it's my partnership with him that matters the most in my life.
Hmm.
And I mean that in a very, I don't mean that in a platitude-y kind of, dogma sort of way. I mean it in a personal relationship way. Um, so, I promise I will come back and answer your question about the 2 years prior.
Keep going. You're
Um,
good.
but I'll kind of go forward in time now, then I'll go backwards slightly. Speaking of this personal relationship with God, and you asked earlier, what's a time where I was really tasting those lemons and not in a good spot. I can remember, this is after I went through all the stage 4 cancer treatments. It was 2 major surgeries, 12 rounds of chemotherapy. That second surgery just kicked my butt. It was like I had it within, I don't know, 30 or 60 days. And man, it was tough. And then so after all that, I had been cancer free for close to a year, where they were, Mayo Clinic was doing scans on me and everything looking good. And then they found a 7-millimeter spot on my liver. And so this, just so you know, this stage 4 cancer had spread so far. It was covered like both sides of my liver. It was all over, right? It was crazy. The first thing they told my wife was, you might just need to make him comfortable. Like he might be done for. And so thank God we got to Mayo Clinic. My wife got us to the Mayo Clinic to get a second opinion, and they put a plan together. But you can imagine, after all that we'd gone through and just hoping and praying that I would be able to, just see the next year, frankly. And it's like, what? Like this actually worked. Like I'm cancer free. That's amazing. And then they found the 7-millimeter spot. And I was just, I was pissed off, honestly. And I can remember going out for a run in the middle of the day, probably a Saturday, and soon after we discovered this 7-millimeter spot, and just jogging and running, it's like as fast as like angry running here, like, and I'm like praying, kind of yelling at the same time to God, like, God, don't you see what this is doing to me and doing to my family? Like, I've got 3 teenagers at home, and like, is this your plan? Is this your will that you're going to help my wife and me have this wonderful family and then just wipe me off the face of the earth? Like, your will be done. But for the record, I don't think that's a good plan. Like, let me just say that. And you know what? I am so pissed off that this cancer has come back and this 7-millimeter spot is here. Like, come on. Like, if you want to take me, is that what you're trying to do? You're trying to just wipe me off the face of the earth now? Then take me now. Like, I literally said that. Like, get it done with. Stop putting my family through this. And nothing happened. And I was still there. But I was honest with God. And that turned out to be, the angriest day of my life about cancer. And I got it out of my system. And you know what? A couple of months later, like the official recommendation prescription for after they found that 7-millimeter spot, they had like debated, should we restart chemo maybe? What should we do here? And thank God the lead liver surgeon, his name is Dr. Mark Trudy, he's amazing. He said, let's wait. Let's just bring him back in 2 months for a scan instead of 3 months. And part of me is like, no, like whatever's in there, let's get it out of there. The other part is like 2 months. Like, what am I supposed to do in 2 months? Like, just worry about this, right? What am I supposed to do? And you know what? They brought me back, but I trusted this guy with my life, literally, right? And he had not done me wrong initially. Amazing what they can do with surgeries. Brought me back for scans in 2 months, and you know what they found? The spot had disappeared. The spot was gone. So much for, like 3 cheers for not over worrying, right? And thank God we didn't restart chemo, because it turned out to apparently not be cancer. Or if it was, it disappeared. But this stuff happens. Like, you can't make this stuff up, right? But it's part of what I will just say briefly again about, that's how I've been able to find the gifts in cancer. Is I called this 7-millimeters that came back. I literally wrote a little note on my iPhone called 7-millimeters of encouragement. Because when this came back, I thought, okay, what can I do now? Right? What's the encouragement? What am I feeling called to do that I should keep doing? What could I do differently? Just like you did with your January and February experiment, Tim, right? Like, here's what I noticed. Here's the 7-millimeters that Mayo noticed. Okay, what can I do now? What do I want to do differently? And so taking that finding ways to get inspiration out of that, I mean, in a sense, that 7-millimeters was a great gift to me, because look at what it got me to. It got me to be honest with God. It got me to clarify that I mean, in that moment of that angry prayer, I realized my family's lives, for me, my kids' lives are more important than mine. That, and as weird as it is for me to say that even now, but it was a touchstone moment for me to say, see what this is doing to my family, not just what this was doing to me. So that's another gift of the way it pulled this cancer out of me in a sense, right? Or we don't know if it was cancer or not at that moment, but that was a great gift to me to have that awareness, to be able to make that prayer. And then the 7 mm spot disappeared. And it turns out I was cancer free for 2.5 years total until it came back just a couple months ago.
Wow. So it's like it hit you in the face with what was important to you almost.
Yes, totally true. That's what it was.
Huh. Okay. So you've mentioned, I'm curious now how you view this whole gifts of cancer thing, because like, is there one that just sticks out, or is it almost like as time goes on, you just keep noticing, like, is there like, this is the main gift, and then there's all these, it's like Christmas morning, right? Here's my big gift, and then here's all my little ones.
I
Or is
love
it
that
just
analogy.
kind of like, is it just
Yeah.
kind of like a thing that just as time keeps going on, you just keep picking up on more and more things?
I love it. It's a great analogy. Was there one? It's like, yeah, was there one big gift? Boy, there are so many, honestly. And this is, as I may have mentioned to you earlier privately before the podcast started. I've decided that I'm going to write a book, and it's going to be called The Gifts of Cancer.
Nice.
There's going to be a lot of gifts that I
Let's
talk
see if
about
that
there.
can crack the top 3 next to Alchemist and Book of Joy.
Ooh,
So
okay.
you got a
on.
challenge. You got a challenge.
Game on, man. Okay, let's see if I can do that. I love that challenge. Yes. And so, if there was one, I would say it's probably this. Just that, like, life is short, and so get your most important work done now. Like, really don't wait, and don't let the pressures of the world, other people's expectations, your own old story of expectations, what you may have heard a teacher or a parent or somebody else say, don't let that crap drive you. Yes, of course, in the spirit of like healthy competition, get inspired by other people who inspire you, but don't constantly compare yourself to others and be wondering if you're meeting their expectations. You already know in your heart and in your bones, like, the work you're meant to do. I believe that. And I feel it. Of course, there are people who can help us get there. Coaches, teachers, parents, spouses, kids, that can help us realize that more fully. But yeah, it's I love your question, Tim, because if I had to pick one great gift, it was that sudden awareness when stage 4 cancer first hit, where, literally I thought I might be dead soon. I mean, that's how serious it was. And to have that realization that, oh crap, seriously, my life might be over soon. Damn it. I people have told me that I'd make a great coach forever. But frankly, I'd kind of lulled myself into being this IT leader and leading IT teams. And yes, of course, you use coaching with that, but not in the really fully studied professional coaching. I'm talking about executive coaching, career coaching sort of stuff. It's an actual discipline. I will just say briefly, it's different from mentorship. It's different from leading and managing, and definitely different from advice giving. So I decided, and I literally was calling the University of St. Thomas Executive Coaching Program leads when I'm in the chemo chair at Mayo Clinic, just saying, I can't quite explain why, but I just feel called to enroll in your coaching program, and I'd like to enroll coming up. So I'm literally attending. I got enrolled, and there's a long story about how much pain it took me just to get enrolled there. but I'm literally wearing my chemotherapy pack in the first day of class. Like, that's how committed I was to, no, I feel this in my bones. I got to be a coach. I got to learn how to be a better coach. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to grad school. I'm going to get it. And you know what? So I completed that 1-year program, got their graduate certificate, and that I'd never been to grad school before. And I got that graduate certificate. Then within 6 months, I got my certification from the International Coaching Federation. The other thing it really called me to do, the cancer, was I've been a musician ever since I was a kid. And it's something that, kind of like friendships, this hasn't occurred to me till now, but kind of like those friendships like Mac Cherry, that I just decided I'm going to keep a little music going in my life. It's something that keeps me creative, keeps me alive, fully human, fully alive. And so I'm going to be a musician. But I've been talking about forever doing an album of my original material. I finally got it done. And you can see behind me, I actually released my album about a year after I completed my cancer treatments. And the final thing I'll mention, so this is all part of the one big, talk about a big gift, right? It's what I realized, the work I had to do. And the other thing I'll mention is, and this was my most, sincerest, and humblest, but perhaps in the way of the proudest prayer. God, just help me be a daddy. Like, I always want to keep being a daddy. Like, these kids, I love being a dad. They're wonderful human beings. I just want to keep being around and having great conversations with my son and my 2 daughters. And I want to be a great husband as well. Like literally, I know this is kind of in the bargaining phase of loss, and challenges, right? But it was the bargaining of, seriously, God, you can take away, like, what do you want? You want a leg? Like, just take this stuff away. Just help me be a dad. Like, if I could just do that, I could be a happy man.
Wow. I'm a big believer in this mind helping the body. I believe in that relationship, and I think you touched on it. But I've heard stories before of people who, like, maybe, like, for example, had terminal cancer, and the family decided to not tell him because they thought that if he knew, he would just give up and he would quit, and then his body would, once he mentally quit, his body would also quit.
Yes.
And there's no way to prove this, but man, it's, you had so much to look forward to, even though you were technically, like, on your deathbed, like, but I'm so curious how much of a factor that played into you being able to come over that, because in that moment you weren't like, it's it, I got nothing. You literally were like, I'm going to do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And again, there's no way to test this, but I feel like there's no way that didn't contribute to a little bit of just your healing.
No way it didn't contribute. I am totally with you, man. Absolutely. I want to give one more shout out to my amazing wife, because when they, the first exam they did here in the Twin Cities, where they found that it was most likely cancer, most likely stage 4, very bad. I was still waking up from the anesthesia. And my wife, who, thank God she's a go-getter, she was asking the doctor questions like, so what is it? Like, what do you think? And he's like, well, it could be it could be cancer, could be something else. Like, no, she's like, seriously, no, you do these all the time. What's your opinion? And he's just like, he said, it looks really bad. It looks like cancer, could be stage 4. You might just need to make him comfortable. So she got this news, and then all of a sudden, in the course of just probably a couple minutes, I was like starting to wake up, and the nurse was coaching my wife to say, "No, don't tell your husband, because then he might lose his will to live. Like, let's keep this under wraps." And my wife held that in her heart. She did not tell me that that's what they said. I knew, because I asked the doctor myself when I woke up. He's like, "Yeah, it's probably cancer. We want to look, probably want to look into it." Like, wow, okay. So I knew it was serious. I didn't know it was like stage 4. You might need to make me comfortable, kind of thing. My wife held that in her heart until we, about 3 weeks later, I believe it was, got down to the Mayo Clinic, And they said, we don't want to be Pollyanna-ish, but we see tough cases a lot. We're going to put a plan together. And that's when my wife burst into tears. And I said, what's wrong, honey? She's like, I've been waiting for weeks for somebody to give us hope. And that's when I heard what she had done for me. So not only do I believe that my attitude had an influence, we can help the attitudes of others, right? Like,
Yeah.
I said to my wife after that, like, number one, please don't do that again. Please don't keep something from me. And second, thank you for doing it then, because that was perfect, right? That's just what I needed. Look at how my wife influenced me in my ability to go through that and say, oh, what is it? And what do I want out of my life still? I distinctly believe that she, working with me and my attitude and all the powers of prayers and angels and saints and the great professional team at Mayo Clinic and elsewhere, that's what got me through cancer. All of it. I don't care which one did it. I think it was a team effort. And to your point, I do believe attitude made a difference.
Wow. Well, this brings me to the big theme that I remember I mentioned to you before we even had this conversation, because you were extremely thoughtful when you said, well, what's the big theme you want to talk about? And I feel like we're at that point now in the conversation where I want to bring up the big theme, which is,
Sure.
You mentioned your main gift is just like, it was like, okay, like you actually viewed your life as this might be over soon. And I got all these things that I should be doing, which is more music and coaching. And now, I mean, that coaching has evolved to you writing a book and spend more time with my kids. And, that's evolved to great memories. And, how does someone like me or somebody listening to this who hasn't been through cancer be able to have that moment where it's like, wait a second, like we could literally, like, this could be over tomorrow for any of us. We don't know.
Yep.
How do like, how would you, and again, this is a tough question, but like in your coaching maybe, or like maybe there's an example out there, but some way that you've been able to say, hey, look, like this can happen now, because I think there's, and whether you're at a stage where it's like, I have no idea, or maybe there's that stage of like, I kind of think I know what I want to do, but I'm not doing it. Like everyone's at their own stage, but man, I want to be able to harness that energy and that feeling of like necessity and be able to spread that all around everybody.
Yeah, I love that. It is a big question. And like the first thing that comes to mind and to my heart too is that everybody, of course, has to live their own life, right? Like I've got things I've experienced, you've have things you've experienced, and you're already a very wise young man. Everybody listening to this has things they've experienced, and they know the challenges on their heart. Like everybody we meet is fighting a battle we know nothing about, right? And so I would say, first of all, don't be afraid to go internal and to spend time on that. We've touched on that a little bit, whether it's just a minute of meditation or it's a 3-day silent retreat, whatever works for you to come back to yourself. I've studied the Enneagram lately, and I'm getting into that. And a lot of that work is really about coming home to yourself. What is this? What did God put in your bones to begin with that just over time and over expectations of the world, whatever it might be, it's kind of, you put layers on that and kind of maybe covered up some of those things that you really wanted to be when you grew up, however you define growing up, right? So that's the first thing I would say is just be willing to give yourself the gift of time for that self-coaching, awareness, reflection, whatever it takes for you. For me, if it's on my calendar, it's real. If it's not, I may or may not do it. Or if it's on my list, right? It's real. So that's just one technique I use is I put something literally on my calendar to say, do your prayers, do your qigong, do your exercise, go to your retreat, which I do on an annual basis. And just for me, that is a coming home. It's a checking in with God to say, how am I doing? What should I be doing more of? What should I be doing less of? I've done it pretty much every year. I've been on 20 of them now. more than 20 of them. So, but you, everybody listening has their own stuff that's coming up for them now. I sense in their hearts right now. We're like, yeah, there is something that I remember thinking about as a kid that I wanted to do, and people said I was good at, but then I, got some feedback that maybe I wasn't as good as I thought I should be. So I gave it up, or somebody else was better in my class. And so I stopped doing it. Like, pay attention to that stuff. You know in your heart, and the people around you that you can trust to give those messages. So that's something. I don't know. Did I even answer your question?
No, that was great. I mean, right away you said something that I was like, whoa, that's a really good point. And you didn't directly say this, but it was almost like you have to live out your story. You have to, like, you can't, if we're going back to The Alchemist, you don't decide that you want the treasure and then the next day the treasure's there. Like, there's this process of going internal and understanding that, okay, I do want to prioritize what's important, but I might not know what's fully important, or I might not know what my passions are. For a lot of kids out there, you might not know. And so, like you said, like, maybe somebody hasn't had that big lesson yet. Maybe in a couple of years they're going to go through something that's going to then be the thing that directs them somewhere else. But if you make the choice to just go internal right now, you're going to be more ready to receive those messages from the universe or the world, or God, or whatever people choose to, believe in. And then you'll be ready to keep directing your life towards those important things. If you're more like, aware, going back to our first word, aware,
yes,
more aware of what's happening. So again, I love the answer, because I think that, again, that's something that people can all do, no matter where they're at, no matter if they have this grand idea for something or they have no clue. It's just to start going inside and saying, all right, like, let's just sit with this, and what can I do? And those retreats obviously sound like that's on my bucket list, but it sounds like that's a lot of time to give yourself. And I'm sure you go through some good reflection there. So you answered it perfectly. Once again, I it just came from your heart. So it was good.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I know our time is limited here. I'll just say two quick things, if I may.
Yeah.
One is, you're right about the silent retreats, and I didn't come into this thinking I needed to be a salesman for Demontreville Retreat House, but it's just been so valuable in my life. And you're right, 3 days is a long time, but just to know there's spiritual guidance going on throughout that, right? And you can talk to a pastor anytime. And the way I talk to other people about it is that, 3 days is a long time. Like, in a weekend in the summer in Minnesota, like, you got to take advantage of that. Get out on the boat, right? Have a cookout, all this great stuff. Yes. And you know what? 3 days is less than 1% of your year.
Yeah.
And who among us isn't giving like at least 1%, if not 5% or more, to your 401k, and imagining that doesn't make a difference. It's only 1%. It's only 5%. No, I'm calling bullshit on that. Like, it makes a difference. And kind of further to your point, Tim, slow and steady wins the race, some people will say. And I also say, and I would leverage another word you use, which is, cumulative effect. The habits that you can build now, especially, what a gift to be a young person these days and have all the great gifts of technology and everything else around you. And you've got time on your side, right? The habits you can start now can reap dividends way beyond what I've ever experienced, and as now a 51-year-old, I'm like, I'm planning on getting to at least 80. So I got a lot of runway too. I'm not going to waste any time.
Yeah.
And I actually had may I share just a brief quote that I found in preparing for this that I think might resonate with your listeners?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. I had mentioned this this writer, this poet, Rainer Maria Rilke, lived, I think, about a little over 100 years ago. But this first came to me from actually the retreats. Somebody had quoted it as, "Be patient with the unanswered questions in your heart." And I just thought, well, isn't that an interesting, phrase? And here's actually the full still short, I promise, but the full reading of it, because I think it's even more beautiful and more poignant for all of us. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Try to love the questions themselves. Like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not now seek the answers which cannot be given you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Getting emotional as I read this. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer. Isn't that beautiful? Just living with the questions. As my former leader said, admiring the problem. So I feel it as a both and, like if I had to put it as a phrase, it's like, life is short, cancer optional, like a third of all men are going to get cancer in their lifetimes. Half of all women will get cancer in their lifetimes. So there's a high probability it's going to hit you as a listener. And it hit me. But you know what? I'm just so thankful that before cancer hit, I had, even though I made a lot of bad choices and choices I would say I regretted, I made some good choices. And this investing in listening to what was in my heart and what I really felt I needed to do, regardless of comparing myself to anybody else, that's what helped me build the foundation, if you will, of that pyramid that I could then add on to in a big, bold way when cancer hit. I'm like, darn it. I knew this. I knew I should have gotten some coaching training before. Now I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
But the blessing is you don't need to wait for that. You can just do it now.
Yeah.
Just do it now.
Yeah.
Wow, Andy truly had so much to share with us there. And before you go, I want to leave a call to action for listeners. And the call to action is take 10 to 15 minutes and sit down and think about what are the gifts of your experiences, right? For Andy, it was cancer. He thought about the gifts of cancers. For you, what is it? Maybe for you, it's also cancer. Maybe for you, it's a battle with mental health or a relationship, or maybe it's something smaller, like even just you don't like your job and you want to figure out what are the gifts, what are the things that is teaching you in itself. And if you can't think of anything on your own, there's obviously this big coronavirus and self-quarantine, and what has this whole situation taught you about yourself or about the world, or what gifts has it left you that you can now take forward and bring with you in the rest of your experience. And so that would be my call to action for listeners. And I think it's truly a powerful thing if we can find the gifts in our negative experiences and the things that really we struggle with, and then take those things forward and become better people for it and serve the world in a bigger way because of it. So I hope you can take this information with you, act on it, and start to make those dreams a reality. I'll see you next time.